The first scene of this movie begins with a weirdo named Shin, who's trying to end a hopeless game that became a real-life death, making logging out impossible. In doing that, Shin fights till he eventually meets the unfortunate final boss, Gatekeeper Origin. He kills the final boss, hoping to release the other players. Unfortunately for the asshole, he couldn't log out, and a gate opens behind him, which blinds him. 500 years later, he wakes in a field, and he's surprised to see his stats improve significantly when he pulls up his window, so he wonders if it's because of the title he acquired by beating the final boss. However, he calms himself thinking he'd be able to log out if he can beat the game, but this loser can't even find the log out button. He even tries checking other players, but it can't display anything because he isn't connected to the network. He feels like the game wouldn't allow him to move, but he could move his limbs in all parts, so he wonders again if it's reality. He begins to scream and roll on the ground like a scum. Then, he realizes that he won't get anywhere if he sticks around, so he uses a bird item magic to direct him to his home base. On his way, he sees a big wall and castle and wonders when and how these things were built. However, he gets home and finds some useless scumbags harassing a young girl because she refuses to tell them where her master is. They try taking her away, but eventually hit the barrier before encountering a big, ugly creature. The mouthy idiots become scared and run away, leaving the girl right in the same spot. The big ugly creature tries to hurt the girl, but Shin kills the creature and leaves it lying on the ground like a headless chicken before she closes and opens her eyes. So, this girl takes him in, right? She's all, "Thanks for saving me," introduces herself as Tira Lucent, and he's like, "Yo, I'm Shin." Now, Tira's kinda confused. "Wait, how do you know my name if you don't know my master?" This dude Shin is totally lost, but Tira's tripping because Shin doesn't know Schnee Razar, the acting shopkeeper of the Moon Sanctum. After some serious brain racking, Shin remembers Schnee, one of his support characters from the game. Anyway, he asks where her master is, but she's not spilling the tea, saying those thugs were asking the same thing. She does say she can send a message to her master, since that's her job, but each message costs 1,000 jewels. Dude just whips out a gold jail coin from his magic item box and hands it over. Tira's mind is blown. How does some random dude have something usually only kings and elders use? Plus, it's a magic amplifier. To her, a gold jail is worth like 10 billion jewels, but for Shin, it's the smallest coin in the game. Tira's like, "Who are you?" He just says he's a regular adventurer, a high human, then bam, she drops the bomb. High humans went extinct during the Dusk of Prosperity, a huge event 500 years ago where tons of people vanished. Basically, the world's 500 years after the game. Shin thanks her, hands over the coin, and says he's looking forward to getting to know her. Tira, never seen anything so baller, is shocked he's just giving it to her, but she takes it, happy to finally hold one of those coins. Shin tells her it'll be useful since she's an elf, and they use magic. He goes on about her black hair and golden eyes, saying she's a beautiful elf, but she's not buying it, thinks it's just an illusion her master put on her to hide her identity. She then explains her black hair brings bad luck, attracting monsters to her village, so she got kicked out until her master rescued her. The master also made the barrier, keeping her safe for 100 years. Shin figures those scumbags, and the monster attacked Tira because of the curse. He asks if it can be removed, but she says not yet. Her master is looking into it. Still, she's fine, just chilling behind the barrier. Shin asks if her hair has always been black, and she says it used to be silver until it suddenly turned black when she got cursed. Shin does some thinking, pulls up his game window, and finds the cursed gift. Turns out, Tira has a randomly occurring curse that changes her hair color and attracts monsters. So, he tries to remove it with his power, and a bit of her hair turns back. After 100 years, Tira is ecstatic. He then tells her to try leaving the barrier, promising to beat up any monsters that show up. She's hesitant, but she tries it, and after a walk through the forest, nothing happens. She's crying tears of joy, seeing the sky and feeling the weather. Tira's super grateful, and Shin's happy he could help. She tells him her master won't be back for a while, and asks what he's gonna do now. Shin says he wants to check out a nearby town. He's curious about the world, wants to see if his other support characters are around, since Shnee's real. Tira suggests Bayrelict Kingdom, a town nearby, and gives him a letter of introduction to skip inspection. Shin's surprised she's giving it to him after just meeting him. She says he deserves it for lifting her curse, and seems like a good guy. She'll let him know when her master's back. Then, Shin's on his way to Bayrelict Kingdom. He finds the kingdom, and luckily, he skips the long line thanks to the letter. Some random dude tells Shin the letter is basically an id that can get him an audience with the king, so he shouldn't lose it. The guy escorts him to an adventurer's guild and leaves. Shin thinks he can get info there, so he goes in. He meets the guild attendee and says he wants to register as an adventurer. She points him to the application area. There, he meets a lady who looks exactly like the first attendee. This one introduces herself as Silica. Turns out the first attendee is her older twin sister Celica, so he pays the fee, fills out the form, and creates a guild card, which takes pretty much all day. Now, Shin's in the guild's restaurant waiting for his food. He notices the armor of the other customers, made of leather or iron, and it's way lower quality than in the game. A few minutes later, Celica, who's kinda a perv, serves him his food, and he's surprised to see her in the kitchen. She says she helps out when she's not busy. She then whispers in his ear that she heard he's got a letter of introduction from the Moon Sanctum. Shin confirms it. She asks to verify it after he eats. Then, a buff dude with with a 2-mark face shows up and introduces himself as Barluxheim, the guildmaster. After 3 hours of looking for hilt grass, he's like, "Yo, where's this grass at? Dude thought it'd be a piece of cake." Shin's like, "Alright, chill. I'll take it easy. All the monsters are probably weak sauce anyway." Then bam, his map goes crazy, showing a monster hauling butt. Turns out it's a level 359 Skullface Jack, rocking a light-type sword and a beefy shield. He spots a wagon wrecked up ahead, so he knows it's a rampage situation, even though it looks kinda weird on his map. Shin tries to jump him quick, but this Skullface Jack is fast, blocking and dodging everything. His sword ain't doing squat, so he's gotta use his limit off power to slice him up. Whoosh! The giant monster poofs into dust, dropping a gemstone, and its sword goes flying off into the wild blue yonder. Shin's feeling like he's getting a handle on his strength, and the game might actually be getting lit. The light-type sword busts through a castle window and everyone's freaking out, thinking His Highness got attacked. Lady Ryo, the princess, yells at the guards to get an appraiser as soon as possible to figure out what the sword's made of and who the heck chucked it into the castle. Meanwhile, Shin rolls back into town and sees a bunch of people huddled around 4 injured folks. He asks the same guard who showed him around what's up, and the guy's like, 12 people got jumped in the woods by a skullface, but only 4 made it. That must have been the busted wagon you saw. Witnesses also saw a sword zoom out of the woods and crash into the castle, but nobody got hurt. Then he asks if Shin knows anything about it, and Shin's all, "Nah man, just harvesting hilt grass, you know?" The guard tells him to holler if anything comes to mind, cause the big boss has got him looking into it. Shin's stoked that nobody got hurt in the castle. He hits up the guild to check in, and everyone's chatting about the skullface. He tells Celica he squashed the skullface and grabbed a gemstone. He says the monster was a unique one, swinging a massive sword that even snapped his blade. Shin's probably trying to get Celica flustered with his story, when an elf lady walks up and tells the useless bad to stop teasing her friend. The elf lady introduces herself as Els. Celica whispers in her ear that Shin took down the skullface Jack, but Els is calling Cap. Shin didn't snag the monster's gear cause it was garbage. Els says you gotta be rank B or have mad loot to get your hands on Jack level gear. Even though Shin doesn't sound like much of an adventurer, she grabs the gemstone to see if it's got the skullface Jack's mana. Then, Shin asks if skullfaces pop up a lot in the northern woods, and she says the undead are born when mana mixes with the leftover anger of the dead. And the northern woods are full of savage monsters, so there's no shortage of dead folks. Shin also says this skulljack was special cause it was level 359. Els tells Celica to use the gem to figure out how strong the monster was while she covers for her at the front desk. After Celica bounces, Els tells Shin that if he's right about the level, he's basically as strong as a whole A-rank party by himself. Shin's like, "Yo, keep that on the DL." From there, Shin heads to the restaurant, and it's Celica who shows up this time. He asks if her twin sister Celica works here, and she says yes. Then, she brings him a drink and asks if she can chill at his table. Suddenly, a tall, ripped dude struts over to Shin's table and sits down right in front of him, and Shin's like, "Who dis?" Shin recognizes his magic spear, a legendary weapon called Venom, but then the dude finally introduces himself. The ripped guy says his name is Wilhelm Avis, and he can tell Shin's a newbie cause his name doesn't scare him. Shin asks him what he's done to spook people, and Wilhelm says they call him Wilhelm the Vampire cause he hunts so many undead. Shin thinks it's just cause he's pale. Hearing that, the people start feeling bad for the unlucky weirdo cause he just acted like he's got a death wish. Wilhelm says the real reason is Venom's draining ability. It can suck the life force out of its victims and give it to him. Just then, Celica shows up with food for both of them, and they chow down. After that, Shin hits up the library, hoping to learn some more about this world. He finds the history books of the Beiralift Kingdom, which was founded 511 years ago, and he remembers Tira said the dusk of prosperity happened 500 years ago, so he figures it must be around that time. He keeps reading until he finds a page that has people from this world who are the same as the in-game races. Barlux and the castle peeps decide to have a secret meeting to talk about the sword and the monster situation. Barlux says the Slayer only came back with the gem, which they're checking out right now. One of the castle dudes wonders why the Slayer didn't take the Skullface's sword or armor, and a lady says the Slayer didn't think it was cool enough. The guy also mentions the appraisal, says the gem is level 369. Barlux suggests they keep a close eye out for more monsters like that in the woods. The first guy says that level puts the monster on par with a king, and the other lady says she's already sent investigators to snoop around. Barlux adds that Skullfaces get active at night, so he tells the knights to stay frosty. The guy asks about the Skullface's weird gear and the person who offed it. Barlux says he can only spill the tea on the weapon, but the Slayer wants to keep their identity hush-hush. The guy thinks that the sword busting into the castle and the Skullface getting taken down are connected since it happened on the same day. Barlux asks what kind of sword it was, and the guy tells Barlux to keep it on the DL before he describes the light-type sword. The sword is as good as, if not better than, their nation's royal sword, which makes it legendary. This makes them super curious about who the mystery Slayer is. Shin's chilling on a bench, right? Grubbing like a boss, enjoying the sunshine. Then bam, this little girl pops up, just staring at him. He's a cool dude, so he offers her some food, and she snatches it up quick. Shin's thinking she looks kinda like a tiger beast girl, but definitely not a beggar. Lost maybe? And after she demolishes the food, she says thanks, and tells him her name is Millie. Shin introduces introduces himself too. He asks where she's headed, and just then, Wilhelm rolls up. She points at him and tells Shin that Wilhelm's there to pick her up. Total surprise, right? These adventurers keep bumping into each other. Shin's like, wait, is Mill your kid? Wilhelm explains she's one of the kids from the church orphanage, and he was sent to find her. As they're about to bounce, Mill runs back to Shin and whispers in his ear to save the fox in the northern woods. Spooky. That night, Shin scratching his head wondering why he was chosen for this fox mission. But first, he needs to figure out how to contact Schnee. He just hopes it's not some kind of trap, you know? Next day, Shin hits up Moon Sanctum to ask Tira if she recognizes this blade he found. All she can tell is that it's an ancient sword. Shin drops the bomb. It's her master's sword, Blue Moon. Only he, Schnee, or someone they designate can even use it. Tira eyes the sword, freaked out, saying she thinks it'll swallow her whole if she touches it. Then, she kinda confesses that everything gets confusing when Shin's around. Awkward. Anyway, Shin apologizes and tells her Blue Moon will let him know if Schnee remembers him or not. So, she agrees to hold on to it for him. He also hands her 2 letters, which will help him figure out if she hears from Schnee. He tells her to write the recipient's name and say, send. Tira's like, why can't you do it yourself? He tried last night, but no dice. She wonders if the cards work for this kind of thing. Shin tests it out real quick, and Tira confirms they do. He just can't send them to Schnee. Apparently, the cards only work if you've met someone in this world. Tira then hits him up for some extra cards because she might need them to study the magic items for her mage ambitions. Shin's smooth. He proposes that it covers the cost of sending a message, and she agrees. Then, he bounces, and our girl Tira starts plotting what she's gonna do with those cards. Shin heads to the northern woods, but he's totally clueless about how to save this fox. He goes deeper and deeper, when suddenly, he hears voices yelling, leave, leave! He thinks it might be a barrier, but then he remembers he's resistant to mental interference, so it doesn't work on him. Still, it's a big sign there's something ahead. He keeps going until he stumbles upon a shrine. The mental interference stops instantly. He keeps moving, and then he hears something shatter. He wonders what it is, but being the weirdo he is, he enters the shrine and spots a little fox trapped in a magic circle. And guess what? The fox is poisoned and cursed. He scoops it up and heals it, as soon as possible. A few seconds later, he hears a sound and checks his map. Tons of enemies are closing in! He steps outside to face them, pulls out his spear, and Slash takes them all out in one blow. Savage! Then, he finds a couple of enemies that weren't on the map before and is all like, huh. Turns out the 2 animal statues in the shrine have transformed into huge monsters. They're invaded golems, level 674. These beefy boys try to smash him, but he dodges like a pro. First, he casts shadow binds to freeze them in place, but they create a freaking miasma so he can't see them. And to make matters worse, the miasma is hurting the fox. He can't do anything because he can't find the enemies in the darkness. While he's brainstorming, the fox makes a noise, pointing him towards the magic circle. From the circle, he can see through the mist and pinpoint the enemies. Boom! He blasts them with his arc bind and cataclysmic strike. After the golems are dust, the miasma vanishes, and the fox is feeling much better. Shin checks the fox's stats and sees it's an elemental, level 211. The fox seems to be enjoying this whole thing. He can tell it wants to go with him. Even though he's never seen invaded golems with miasma and an elemental kitten before in the game, it could be a hint about how to get back to his world. Plot twist. Meanwhile, Master Schnee gets a letter from Tira, and she's wondering where she got the magical item. She checks the letter and sees her master's name, Shin, on it. Shin leaves the shrine, planning to report to the guild when he gets to town, but he's keeping the elemental a secret for now. Then he tames the little fox on the condition that he keeps its level and species hidden. Smart move. He names it Yuzuha. A few moments later, he gets a message from Tira saying she sent Schnee a message, and she'll let him know when she hears back. She also asks if it's possible to attach items to cards and send them. He tells her to say hi to Schnee for him, and then heads to the guild. He makes his way to the guild and reports to those perv twin sisters. These airheads are trying way too hard to get his attention. Shin's not having it, so he heads straight to the board to check out other jobs. He spots a skilled successor job needed at the orphanage next to a church in the westward. Perfect! He takes the job so he can see Mill alone. Next thing you know, he's at the church orphanage, asking a woman if he can see Millie about something. Millie's stoked to see him and gives him a hug. Seeing how much Mill likes him, the woman knows he's a good guy. Shin introduces himself as an adventurer, and the woman introduces herself as Tria, the church's nun. With a nod from Tria, he asks Millie if this is the little fox she was talking about, and she says yes. She thanks him, and Shin tells Yuzuha to thank her too. Then she asks the woman to tell him more about her requests. The woman explains she's looking for someone who inherited certain skills like Purify so they can teach them to her. Shin wonders what she needs it for, heal or cure. He tells Tria he can teach her, but it depends on her. Tria's about to talk rewards when Shin cuts her off, saying he doesn't want any money. Instead, he wants to know about Mille's power and wants her to share any information the church finds out. Tria's speechless for a sec, thinking over his terms, until Mille says it's okay with her. So, she accepts his terms. Shin wants to know if anyone comes to the church saying anything interesting, and he's especially curious about Mill's power. Tria tells him Millie has the Star Composer's title and sometimes has crazy accurate visions, but they've never been wrong before. She can predict the future and to keep people from using her for evil. She's already told her crew to be careful who they tell about Mill's power. She also mentions Wilhelm, who helps them out, and how bad guys stay away from the kids because they're scared of Wilhelm. Hearing this, Shin takes the job, and she says he'll be teaching another one of their sisters to learn Purify. Shin thinks it'll be her, but she says their former priest has a granddaughter, Leisha, and things would go more smoothly if she took over the church. All the kids in the orphanage are having a blast playing with Yuzuha, while Shin and Mille are sitting and watching them. Then, one of the church sisters comes over to ask if he's going to save them. Shin's not sure if she means the kids or the nun, and she adds that the nun might get rid of the orphanage. She explains the church doesn't have a priest right now, so a new one has to take over. Shin asks why Tria can't do it, and she says it has to be someone with a special skill. Shin figures out that's why she needs the Purify skill. She also says the greedy and worthless jerk, the current priest, wants to shut down the orphanage, and the former priest's daughter might have a better claim to the church. And Shin asks why a priest would want to ditch the orphanage, and she tells him they all hate him, and that he's a pig who only cares about money. Mill pipes up and tells the sister that Shin will save them, and she's relieved to hear it. Then, Shin asks the sister if Mill's usually right, and she says yes. He pats Mill's head, and she starts blushing. A few moments later, Tria comes out of the church to call Shin, and finds him chilling under the tree with all the kids asleep on top of him. Tria introduces her sister Leisha to Shin, saying she can be a bit careless but works hard. Shin tells Leisha he'll teach her the Purify skill, and it's up to her if she can learn it. Then, he asks if they know where a ton of high-level undead pop up, and Tria mentions the ghost plains are famous. Suddenly, Wilhelm walks in and recognizes Shin as the adventurer who took the quest, and he grills Shin about what he's after, and the sisters spill the beans about Mille and the adventurer from the orphanage who helped keep her secret. Tria also vouches for Shin, saying Mille said it's okay. Wilhelm's like, if Mille says so, I trust him. Shin promises not to tell anyone or do anything shady, but Wilhelm immediately points his venom spear at him, threatening to off him if he does. They apologize for his impatience, but still kinda roast him. I mean, harsh review. Shin explains that Leisha needs to take down 200 undead over level 150 while holding a prayer orb to learn Purify. Leisha's all, this is gonna take forever. To help, Shin says he'll weaken the monsters and Leisha can land the final blow, which will count as a kill. He adds that prayer orbs are hard to get, but he's already got one, so they're golden. Wilhelm, the tall, kinda clueless guy, thinks Shin's alright, but still can't let him handle level 150 plus undead with Leisha alone, so he's tagging along. Shin's cool with it, and Tria wishes Lassia good luck. Shin and Yuzuha are strolling down the church corridor when they spot Wilhelm up ahead, and he gets all up in Shin's face. Wilhelm asks if Shin's the chosen one, but Shin plays dumb. Wilhelm explains what that means, and Shin asks if it includes memories of past lives. Wilhelm says nope, mostly info about items and monsters. Wilhelm admits he's never heard of anyone remembering a past life, but won't push Shin to reveal everything. Then, he warns Shin to watch who he tells cause most people haven't heard of the chosen one. Surprisingly, Wilhelm seems caring, which makes Shin wonder if people are really scared of him. Wilhelm doesn't care what others think. Shin sees him as a hero protecting the orphanage, but Wilhelm says the kids cry cause some greedy jerks keep messing with them, and he wants to stop those stupid greedy pigs to shut people up. This cracks Shin up. Then, Shin gets a message from Tira, saying her master responded and will be back as soon as she's done working. He should keep them posted when he leaves Bay Relict, and her master has a ton of questions about him. Immediately, the top left of his window starts flashing, important, and he clicks it to get a letter of introduction from the Moon Sanctum. Wilhelm recognizes the letter and pulls out his own. Looks like they're both surprised to see the other has one. They hold the letters close, and they resonate and glow. The next morning, Shin, Wilhelm, and Lacia head to the Ghost Plains to hunt undead. Lacia starts sweating buckets, but Shin hands her the prayer orb and tells her to hold on tight. They walk around until they run into some undead. The undead try to attack, and Shin blasts them with a single ablution spell. Then, he tells Lacia to attack the biohounds. She points her weapon, chance heal, and they vanish. More enemies show up, and Shin and Wilhelm attack while Lacia heals with her healing magic. They keep walking until they hit a blue wall-like barrier, a seal created by the guild. Wilhelm touches the wall with his guild card, and it opens. As they walk through, Wilhelm warns them the undead are on another level beyond this point, so they better get ready. On Shin's map, he spots enemies ahead, including wrapped raptors and jumpkins. He tells Wilhelm to take the ones in front, while he takes the ones on their left, and Yuzuha sticks with Leisha to handle anything that comes their way. Lascia heals a bunch of enemies and levels up a lot, even though she's still scared stiff. Some folks from the castle also hear about the undead in the Ghost Plains and come hunting. The elite groups from the castle are struggling to fight a huge skullface when a silver-haired elf named Schnee shows up to help take it down. After whooping the monster, she heals everyone in the elite group with her wide heal magic. They recognize her and bow, and she acknowledges them too. The head of the elite group tells her about the skullfaces popping up and hopes the one she killed was the last. She says she'll keep searching around, and they should use the magic item they have if they run into any more monsters. Wilhelm, the fit tall jerk, kills a huge skullface, and Lacia starts feeling something as she's about to use her magic. Shin says it happens when she meets the requirements to learn a new skill. She's tripping out, thinking she's dead, but her mind gets flooded with images of how to use the Purify skill. Shin congratulates her, and she's stoked that they can save the orphanage now that she's leveled up. They're about to take a break before before heading back to Bayrelict when they see some weird magic stuff in the sky, animating the undead. The magic stuff drains power from the monsters until they can't stay solid and vanish. It sucks up all the power and forms a small, huge, unbelievable monster with level 804, a deadly monster looking for a human buffet. They think they'll be okay, cause they have the seal, but the huge monster jumps super high and shatters the seal with one punch. And it's not just the huge monster, other skullface enemies show up too. Wilhelm tells them to break through and run, but Shin reminds him the seal's gone, and he can't let the monsters roam free, so he's gonna stop them, no matter what. He chants, "Limit off," and tells Wilhelm to protect Yuzuha and Lassia. Wilhelm is blown away by Shin's power and hopes to get an explanation later. Shin uses lighting banker magic to clear a path through the monsters, so Wilhelm and Lassia can escape. After they leave, he pulls out his sword to fight, and Yuzuha fires off its foxfire to hit the enemies. The huge monster roars, and more skullfaces arrive. Shin thinks this is never gonna end, cause more keep showing up every time it roars. He chants Flying Sparrow Thunderstrike to attack, but it barely takes down half of them, though it does leave a huge crater. Shin wishes Schnee was there so he'd have more options. Suddenly, he sees a blue marker on his map getting closer, and he makes a beeline for it. Turns out the blue marker is Schnee. After a sec of awkward silence, the enemies charge their way, and the badass Yuzuha throws up a big wall to hold them back. Schnee hugs her weirdo master, Shin, hoping for some love. Shin stumbles over his words until he finally says, "I'm back," and she welcomes him with tears streaming down her face. Yuzuha gets tired, the barrier fades, and the huge monster heads their way. Now they have to fight the enemies and catch up later. They both chant Sanctuary to create a light magic circle in the sky that kills and vanishes the enemies. Shin then uses his mighty sword to slice the huge monster in half. Right before its soul vanishes, it tries to say, "Give that power to me," but its pleas are useless. Then, Shin grabs its gemstone. Soon after they beat the crap out of that giant monster, Shin's like, "Yo, we gotta talk." So, he spills the tea about everything that went down after he got yeeted to meet Gatekeeper Origin, all the way to waking up in that field after 500 years. Shnee's relieved to hear he's alright. Then she's like, "The dungeon just vanished, poof, and the other support characters and I were tripping cause we were still around. Shouldn't we have disappeared with you?" So, they went looking for him, but then seismic stuff hit the fan, and the whole continent went nuts, so they split up. Schnee went back to Moon Sanctum, and that brings us to now. Shin's kinda worried about her calling him Master with people around, cause he doesn't want to reveal who he really is. He suggests she just calls him Shin, but she thinks it's kinda dumb, but agrees anyway. Then, she asks what he's planning on doing, and he says he's thinking of hitting up that site he read about in the kingdom's library. Shnee's only done a quick look-see there, and she doesn't know what it's like inside. Then she asks if he finds a way out of here, will he return her to her real world, and he says yes. He then asks how much she remembers from the game, and she's like, "Everything, dude. Everything from the day we all got sucked into this place." She says she became more aware during what Shin and the other support characters called the death game. Before that, it was like she was just watching a video. Basically, the other support characters knew they'd peace out after they logged out, after a pretty intense convo about the past. From way back then until the next morning, they plan to throw a party once they're back at Moon Sanctum. Then, she asks where he found Yuzuha. He introduces Yuzuha and tells her to keep it on the DL. Schnee could tell right away that it wasn't just any ordinary spirit, especially with those 3 tails. Suddenly, Yuzuha wakes up and starts chatting with him. Shin's kinda blown away, but Yuzuha's head cleared up when that big creature bit the dust. He tells Yuzuha to keep quiet when other people are around, and asks it to merge its 3 tails into one, which it does. Schnee picks Yuzuha up and starts petting it. They bail from the forest as soon as possible to catch up with Shin's other buddy. That meathead Wilhelm is booking it with Leisha on his back when they spot something coming at them, hauling butt. They think it's the monster's goons coming for revenge, but surprise, surprise, it's Shin and Schnee. Wilhelm's a little salty that he got the wrong idea, and Leisha passes out. Back at the castle, the peeps are checking out the messed up ground, but they're clueless about what happened. Lady Ryo, bless her heart, wonders who could have been behind that magical light show that healed everyone and toasted the monsters. Gadras, one of the knights, spots Shin's epic sword way over on the other side of the crater and tells Ryo about it. They're also scratching their heads about what kind of power could pull that off. Then, they see a falcon symbol on the sword, and Gadras knows a blacksmith who carves swords like that and slaps falcon engravings on them. Gadras shows them a sample of what the sword can do. He says the blacksmith is the black blacksmith, the best in the game. Lady Ryo can't believe high humans are still kicking around, cause she thought they'd bailed on the world. Gadras says the blacksmith owns Moon Sanctum, and she decides they'll pay them a visit when they get back to town. She even says she'd challenge the blacksmith to a duel if she found him. Gadras warns clueless Ryo not to just jump him. He thinks she might just be testing his skills or something, but her look says she's got some sense after all. Wilhelm's grilling Shin, wanting to know who he is, what's up with all the crazy stuff he's been doing, and how he got Schnee, who bows to no one, to follow him around. Shin's about to give Schnee props for taking down the big monster, when Wilhelm scares him with his venom spear. Shin's all, "How'd you know?" And Wilhelm's like, "Dude, I saw you throw down that flashy spell and catch up to us like it was nothing." After a little spear play, Shin reveals his true identity and his connection to Schnee. Wilhelm is surprised to hear this. Shin then asks asks if there are any records left of them, the high humans, and Wilhelm says they're all about how Shin was ridiculously strong and skilled. Schnee chimes in, saying others left behind some crazy stories too. Anyway, Shin's casually like, yeah, I'm a blacksmith. He offers to fix up Wilhelm's venom spear at a discount, but Wilhelm doesn't trust him because he looks like a shady salesman. But then, sleepyhead Leisha wakes up and is stoked to see Shin. They introduce her to Schnee Razor, and she thinks she's super cool. On their way out of the ghost plains, she almost eats dirt, and Shin's like, must because you were running like a horse, huh? Wilhelm then tells Shin that his job's done now that Leisha learned the skill, so anything that comes up at the church is their problem. Shin gives the deadbeat a card to hit him up if things go south, and he says he'd have to be desperate to use it. Translation, Shin's gonna get dragged into something serious. Shin tells him to drag him in anyway. Besides, he can't ditch the first friend he made in Bayrelict and the kids he's trying to protect. You know, keep your popcorn ready till he needs you. Then, everyone goes their separate ways. Shin and Schnee finally roll up to Moon Sanctum late at night, and it smells amazing, so they're all about grubbing first. Tira comes busting out of the inner room to hug her master, and almost reminds Schnee about what she wrote in the letter, but Schnee calms her down. Then, clueless Tira figures out that the dude standing there is Shin, and she's wondering how they hooked up, explaining that whole story would take forever, so they decide to eat first. Tira freaks out when her master says Shin will be eating with them. Schnee feels a little dumb that she hasn't told Tira that Shin is the owner of Moon Sanctum. She's totally shocked to hear that the owner is a legendary high human. Shin told her who he was when they first met, but I guess she didn't take him seriously. She's scared of getting the boot, so she apologizes to him super quick. Then, he introduces his talking elemental partner, Yuzuha. Everything's brand new to Tira. Schnee whips up a killer dinner, claiming she picked the best of the best ingredients cause it's a special occasion, but can't go into detail cause of time. Shin's like, yeah, Schnee used the top shelf ingredients I got, and Tira's all, no way would anyone even think of using those fancy ingredients, let alone cooking with them. They thank each other for the meal, and start chowing down, with Shin and Tira both begging for more. After dinner, Shin seems bummed about his other support characters, so he asks Schnee about them. She tells him that they all agreed it was best not to worry about you. Shin's glad that at least they aren't chasing after someone who might not even be around anymore. Tira, who's hammered, interrupts them and starts talking smack. Schnee heads to her room to crash, while Shin and Yuzuha go to their room too. In the middle of the night, he finds Schnee sleeping next to him in his bed, and he can't fall back asleep. He watches as tears roll down her face, apologizes to her in his head, and wipes her face, even though he doesn't know why she's crying. The next day, Shin wakes up and Schnee's straight up gone. He spots some silver hair and is like, yo, what's that? Turns out, Yuzuha's already chilling in her human form. Shin's freaking out, so he whips up a dress elemental in the game for her to wear. Schnee and Tira are shook to see Yuzuha all human-like. Anyway, Schnee's being a total MVP and makes breakfast, and everyone's super grateful. Then, Shin's like, yo Yuzuha, what you doing at the shrine? She's all, it's the least sketch place to be. He asks if she knows anything about the magical circle symbols, but she's clueless. He tries to get some tea about the peeps who vanished 500 years ago, but nada. Yuzuha explains she was just napping when a natural disaster went down, and she tried to stop it, but it messed her up, so she was recovering in the shrine. She thought she was a goner, but then Shin showed up. Shin's like, yo, Millie's the real hero, gotta give her some props, maybe with a gift. Schnee suggests kafal, some elven baked goods Tira makes. Shin reminds them that the Moon Sanctum ain't exactly a bakery, and Schnee's like, chill, you're the only one who can unlock the armory to restock. So, he decides to forge some swords later to fill up the store. Schnee's got some news. Shin needs to meet Gyrard as soon as possible, who's one of his support characters. Shin scratching his head like, how's Gyrard still alive? High beasts only live 150 years max. But Schnee's like, a few days won't matter, but he's probably not got much time left. He's been waiting for you, fam. She reminds Shin that Gyrard united all the beast tribes and made the Farned Beast Alliance, and Shin remembers they called him the first beast king. Turns out the current king, the 8th, is a total beast himself, with all the military skills and leadership qualities, and he's been following Gerard's lead and waiting for Shin. Then, Shin tells Yuzuha and Schnee to get ready to roll, and Schnee tells the useless Tira she's coming too this time. They guess they don't need to be so uptight about the Moon Sanctum now that Shin's back. Tira's worried about the shop, but she's gotta tag along if they want her to. They need to gear up, but Schnee's gonna report on the skull faces to the kingdom first, and Shin's gonna hit up the guild after forging some swords to find a job heading towards Farned to rank up. He'll hit her up on the message card about where to meet up. Schnee suggests they form a party so they can use voice chat, aka telepathy. Schnee also tells Tira to jump on the opportunity to register as an adventurer. She heads to her room to switch outfits, Schnee bounces, and Shin and Yuzuha head to the forge. At the forge, Shin tells Yuzuha she can look, but no touchy-touchy, cause some of the weapons are cursed. Then he starts cranking out swords, getting perfect scores scores every time. Finally, Tira's decked out, Yuzuha shrinks back to her little fox form, and they all head to the guild. Poor Tira is bugging out seeing all the crowds on the way to the guild. She's like a little kid at Disneyland. She grabs Shin's hand like she knows the way, but Shin's gotta remind her that he's the one leading the way. At the guild, Shin gets bumped up to rank E, and he's confused because he hasn't even finished a single job. Celica's like, dude, you took down a high-ranking Skullface and a surprise Skullface horde. The guild verified your reports and decided to promote you. Then, she's all nosy and asks if Tira's his girlfriend because she heard they were holding hands like a couple, but Shin claims they're just traveling together on business, and since he's here, he figured she could register as an adventurer and get a guild card. Celica tries to pry more, but Shin shuts it down real quick. Then he asks if she has any info on sites, like the destroyed places from the Dusk of Prosperity, but Celica says they can't spill that tea to anyone below rank B. Shin agrees to check back once he's leveled up, and then asks if there's any job he could do on the way to Farned. She checks her database and finds that someone needs a wagon escort to Bairion's staging post. She also lets him know that they're leaving this afternoon when the bell rings twice, and 2 adventurers have already signed up, so he should link up with them. Tira's guild card is gonna take a hot minute to process, and Shin and the other 2 adventurers aren't meeting up until the afternoon, so they decide to kill some time wandering around town on the way to the church. After wandering, they find their way to the church where they run into Leisha, who's cleaning up. The ladies introduce themselves, and when Leisha hears Shnee's name, she starts firing off a million questions, like, who's got time to answer all that? Mille's stoked to see Shin and Yuzuha again. She wishes they'd never leave her. Leisha happily announces that she's gonna be the next head of the church. Tria also chimes in that the kids are super happy too, but they don't know how to repay him. Shin's flattered, and then asks about Wilhelm, and she says he's out investigating other priests. Nobody knows why that greedy dude wants to take over the church. Then, he gives them stuff enchanted with all kinds of magic, including Mille. Instantly, a horde of kids rushes into the room and dogpile Shin, begging him to stay and play. The next second, they're all over Tira, and she starts screaming, such a low-life fool. As they're leaving the church, Leisha apologizes to Tira for all the commotion the kids caused. Tira was just unsure how to feel since she's never played with kids before, but she said the kids were cute and lovely. Then, they head to the guild to grab Tira's guild card, and then it's time to pick up the Moon Sanctum. Shin can't believe she forgot they were picking up their house, but she thinks it's insane to carry a house around in the first place. It feels totally normal to Shin though, since he owns it. In a safe spot along the road, Shin pulls out a super refined crystal, saying it's enchanted with the teleport spell, so he tells her to let them use it to get to the Moon Sanctum. Tira thinks everything about him is extraordinary, and he casually adds that he made the crystal himself. Then, they teleport to the Moon Sanctum, and he chants storage to shrink the house into a ring-like thing in transport mode. Looks like they're done with all their errands, so it's time to head to the job. They spot Nak's wagon right away when they get to the meetup spot, and Shin and Tira introduce themselves to the first adventurer. The first adventurer introduces himself as Gaien, and the other red-haired young adventurer says his name is Tsubaki. Then, a dude rolls up and introduces himself as Nak the merchant, and they're off. Back at the castle, the knights are reporting to Her Majesty about the Moon Sanctum going Mia. Everyone knows it's an immovable structure that survived the Dusk of Prosperity, and no one could break into it. The Moon Sanctum is a mystical shop built with lost tech. With this, Her Majesty thinks it's more than just a problem for the Bay Relic Kingdom if the Moon Sanctum is gone. They also report that they heard Shnee's headed to the castle. Lady Rion's sister is stressing about Lady Rion not being back yet, and they don't have enough info to do anything. Then, she suggests they just chill and wait for Miss Shnee to arrive, and Her Majesty agrees. On their way to Bairun through the forest, Shin tells Tira that people who take on escort jobs need to be pretty capable and confident in themselves, since they're more likely to get attacked by bandits than monsters. Then, they decide to reintroduce themselves. Gaien, an A-ranked samurai, seems a bit useless with magic. Tsubaki, a ranky boxer, specializes in support spells that boost speed. Tira is a newbie alchemist, rank G, who can use a bow and sword along with healing spells. And Shin, also a samurai like Gaien, is rank E and can do a bit of fire and lightning magic. Oh, and don't forget, Yuzuha, Shin's cute little monster. Gaien and Tsubaki are pretty impressed by Shin's dual skills as a samurai and spellcaster, not to mention that a monster likes him. Tsubaki guesses Shin must be from Hinamoto since most samurai come from there. Hinamoto is this cool island nation created by disasters and is home to loads of samurai and shinobi guilds. Shin starts asking about the guilds in Hinamoto, and Gaien names a few: Kasho Figetsu, Majin Keppuroku, and Kuromiko Jinja. They totally sound like they belong in a game. Suddenly, a group of armed bandits stops their wagon and threatens them with death if they don't hand over all their cash and cargo. Nak is just shaking like a leaf, so Shin tells him to hop in the wagon, and Yuzuha rushes to defend him. The bandits say they won't get excited unless they hear some screams. They seriously underestimate little Tsubaki. Then Gaien shows off his sword, warning the bandits to back off, or they'll end up on the wrong end of his blade. Shocker, the bandits aren't scared at all and know their ranks. Shin and the crew are super surprised that these guys know so much about them. Tira spots some bandits hiding behind trees, so she starts firing arrows at them, which totally ticks off the bandits, and boom, a fight breaks out. Tsubaki goes in first. first, with her flashing vigor attack in one hit. Guyan slashes one down while Shin joins in and takes out some more. The bandit leader is stumped, wondering how they all have so much power, even though some are ranked E or lower. Even with him being the last one standing, he tries to bluff with his magic sword, but Shin closes in and slices it right off. Then he just goes to town on the bandit leader, tying him up afterward. Tira notices that Shin is super angry and has this bloodlust vibe going on, so she hugs him tight until he calms down. Everyone's like, "What's with this girl?" She remembers how her mentor used to calm her down with the same kind of hug. Guyan tells everyone that the bandits were after goods related to the church, without even knowing which ones to snag. All they wanted to do was mess them up and steal their stuff. Shin recalls Triya saying that they need official approval from the church HQ to pick the next head, making him wonder if someone's trying to mess that up. Still, he feels like escorting the wagon is the right move. They finally roll into Bairayun, and Nak thanks them and compensates them with job completion certificates they can turn in at the guild. From there, they head to report in. Guyan and Tsubaki plan to hit Kilmont while Shin and Tira are off to Farnid. Since Farnid is a bit of a trek, Shin suggests they snag a wagon. When they reach the wagon shop, they see that all the wagons are pretty much the same, so Shin thinks it'd be smarter to modify one to reduce the bumps and improve wheel movement. Sounds a bit flashy, but hey, it's all about comfort. They look for a good-sized wagon that has enough room to sleep in and stash their stuff for when Schnee shows up. The seller mentions that they need horses with good legs to pull the wagon they want. Shin then mentions he's heard of people using monsters to pull their wagons instead. The seller says some folks do that since monsters are way stronger, but he'll have to tame one first. The next scene, Shin is thinking about having Yuzuha transform in case things get dicey when Schnee calls him telepathically, saying she wrapped up her business in the kingdom. Shin tells her they've got a wagon now, but need to find some horses to head to Farnid. Schnee confidently says she'll handle catching a monster to pull the wagon. She also fills Shin in about the kingdom's worries over the Moon Sanctum's sudden disappearance. Schnee mentions she'll be in Bairayun within a day, but reminds him to wait for her. Shin agrees to let her know when they find an inn. He tells Tira to take some time to explore and soak in the sights while they look for a place to crash. They end up finding a nice inn thanks to a random woman, but it costs almost half their reward. Shin is a bit stressed about it, but Tira reassures him that the lady probably assumed adventurers can afford it. Once they go to their rooms, Yuzuha plops down on the bed and transforms into her human form. Shin decides it's time to give his sword some TLC. Tira comes in asking if he told her master they're staying in the city. He tells her she'll meet them here, but he can't say when. A bit later, they have dinner, and Shin gets up to take a quick bath. But oh no, Yuzuha and Tira beat him to it, so he figures he'll just keep working on his weapons. However, the two start giggling and disturbing him, so he steps away from the bathroom. The next morning, Shin focuses on the wagon until Schnee shows up. Tira decides to watch him tweak the wagon, and to her surprise, he fixes the wheels to avoid shaking in under a minute. Shin chooses a way to install the bearings without drawing attention. Just then, Schnee calls Shin to let him know she's waiting for them in the woods beyond the north gate, and he says they'll be there as soon as they can. Shin quickly wraps things up at the wagon store, and they head out to meet Schnee. When they arrive at the woods, they spot this massive monster named Grufazio Jade, level 751, that Schnee captured. Curious, Shin asks her where she got such a beast, and she mentions it came from a nearby mountain. Shin praises her, but Schnee turns a bit mushy when it comes to him. The monster sniffs Tira and moves forward to nuzzle her cheek. Then Shin asks why she chose this specific monster, and she explains it needs to be a beast to pull his wagon. Shin starts to fret that the monster is way too big for their small wagon. Anticipating Shin's reaction, Schnee manages the monster to shrink down. It can adjust its size, so it gets down to a size that fits the wagon. Tira is so spooked she faints. Somehow, both Shin and Schnee act like this is no biggie, but even Shin didn't think she'd bring something this high level. Still, he's stoked to have such an awesome beast pulling their wagon. The monster lets out a sound, and Yuzuha translates it to mean, they're in good hands. Awesome, both monsters can communicate. Schnee tells them the monster's name is Shimmer, and it can use illusion and thunder attacks. Then she reminds Shimmer to watch out for her master. Shin hooks Shimmer up to the wagon and directs it to take them to his old buddy, Gerard, in Farnid. Even though they try to lay low, they still catch a lot of attention, but there's nothing they can do about it. What matters is that the wagon rides smoothly, and even outperforms a royal carriage. In short, they love it. Then Yuzuha mentions that Shimmer used to rule the mountain with its mom, but a fierce adventurer took down the mom, leaving only Shimmer to survive. An elf found him and helped him get stronger so he could return to the mountain. Hearing this, Schnee gets why Shimmer wasn't cautious around her. The monster communicates that he followed her because he recognized her familiar scent, leading to the realization that it's actually Tira's smell. Turns out, Tira saved a puppy when she was little, so Schnee decides to dissolve her contract with Shimmer and urges Tira to form a new one. Tira creates a contract with Shimmer and feels a wave of weakness wash over her, making Shin scoop her up to help her rest. At night, they find a place to crash and get a fire going to keep warm. Schnee tells Shin that she let Tira have Shimmer to protect her, cause they can't always be by her side, and she'll feel better knowing Shimmer's got her back when she's figuring things out. She can just summon Shimmer anytime, and they can count on him. Then, Schnee's like, she'd bail Shin out anytime he's in deep doo-doo. Shin feels relieved and tells her that she's the one he runs to when he's totally trouble. Next morning, morning, they meet up with two big shots at the southeastern Farnid, right on the edge of Ralua Forest. Schnee says he messaged Gerard, so these guys gotta be here to meet them. The two dudes bow and say they're there on orders from the first king, and Schnee asks them to take them to Jirard. Shin's keeping the wagon powered up, and Shimmer shrinks down to the size of a regular dog. As they're being led to the mansion, Schnee tells Shin that these two guys are Gerard's grandkids. Seeing Shin, Jirard calls him master, and then says he never thought he'd see him again in this lifetime. Shin thought he was a goner too. Before they get down to business, Gerard introduces the current Beast King, Wolfgang, and his daughter, Kore, plus his two right-hand men, Van Ku and Rajam Dalk. Shin introduces himself as Shin, a high human. They both tell each other to chill and talk normal, but Gerard's being sarcastic, calling Shin his master, which he usually doesn't do. Jirard says it's the only way to put his crew at ease, cause high humans are so legendary and scary, the Farnid people see them as figures to be feared and respected. To kick things off, Gerard and Shin reminisce about the time they wasted some huge monsters, and they laugh it up. Jirard wants to brag about founding a nation, but Schnee already spilled the beans, so it's old news. Schnee figures it's better she said something than waiting for Jirard to exaggerate. Then, Schnee whips up some tea while they keep chatting. Shin tells Gerard the same story he told Schnee, and Gerard says he was trying to find him too, but couldn't get to him. Before Shin can get a word in, Gerard drops a bomb. He's gonna die soon, less than a month left. Shin's like, how do you know? And Gerard says he's felt something's off for a few weeks, but he was sure when Schnee told him about Shin. Then, he asks Shin for a duel. He wants to fight Shin, the strongest warrior. What the f***? Shin's totally mind blown. Shin wonders if Jirard wants to die in battle like a true warrior, cause Jirard's definitely hoping for it, but Shin accepts the challenge. Then, he asks if Jirard's told his people, and he says he's told them about his short life expectancy, but not about the duel yet, and he plans to. He also mentions that his two confidants, Van Ku and Rajim Dalk, have been fighting alongside him since Shin disappeared. They're the longest living types of beasts, but they're getting old, Gerard included. Then, he says that Wolfgang's a great leader, who listens to the people and is one of them. He adds that Wolfgang's already a fine replacement for him, but his only regret is never dueling Shin. That night, Gerard tells his people that he's found where he's gonna die, and he's asked Shin to duel him before his time's up. The duel's in a week. Kor's totally not okay with this and wonders if everyone's just gonna sit there and let their master say whatever. But Jirard tells her he's lived a long life, and she'll learn why he's lived so long in a week. She's got to accept her master's wish. Jirard then tells them they'll fight in Ralua Forest. It'll be the final and greatest battle of his life, and he wants them to see it. Shin helps Jirard fix up his hand shield weapon in his blacksmith room at the Moon Sanctum. Seeing it, Jirard feels like he's back in the day. Then, he asks if Shin would go back to his world if he found a way, and leave Schnee behind. He thinks for a minute and says he will go home. That's why he's been fighting. Jirard's surprised, but what can he do? Nada. Shin wishes everything could be solved at once for him and Schnee, but the truth is you don't always get what you wish for. Then, he tells Shin he's looking forward to the next day, fight day. The next day, Gerard is pumped, ready, and raring to go for the duel, so they all head to Ralua Forest in Shin's wagon for the fight. Even his crew hasn't seen him grinning like that in ages. When they get there, Schnee tells Shin to fight his heart out and not to worry about anything. Then, she bows and tells him she's leaving Jirard in his hands. Wolfgang and Kore also promise not to forget Gerard's teachings as the first king. Then, the fight kicks off with warm-ups while everyone watches. The warm-up brings back memories of their fights 500 years ago, even though the warm-up is like the end of the world is coming. Then, Gerard transforms into a huge single fang and then remembers Shin told him he'll fight as hard as he can, but he won't use the titles he acquired when he defeated the final boss. It won't be fair to rely on such abilities, but he still wants to fight Shin at full power because he believes this is the only moment his fangs can reach Shin. Shin throws the first punch, and Jirard dodges it by appearing behind him, thinking Shin's slow, but Shin blocks his attack with his sword. Jirard channels a ton of power and blasts it at Shin, who tries to stop it, but it's a tough one. Jirard appears behind him to hit him, but Shin dodges again. He starts chaining skills together, but none get past Shin's sword. Shin decides to fight at full strength, strikes with haze, and Jirard strikes with legendary excellence. At the same time, the huge strikes from both ends break Shin's sword to pieces. In the end, Jirard lands a close blow on Shin, then falls to the ground and turns back to his human form. Shin's impressed with his strategy, and that he actually hit him. Jirard says he didn't live for 500 years for nothing, and his wish came true. Then, he asks Shin to do something for him as a reward for landing a blow. Shin does it, and Gerard dies. It's over. But then, Shin comes back with Jirard's body, and tells his crew that their king landed a hit on him, a high human, which means Jirard leveled up to his level. Gerard's confidants are relieved that he looks satisfied even in death. Everyone in the nation cries for the first king, and his crew throws the best funeral ever. That night, Schnee sees her master sitting outside alone, staring at the sky, and she runs to him and hugs him. She consoles him and asks him to tell her if there's anything she can do. With tears in his eyes, he says he knew this was what Jirard wanted, but it sucks to have a friend die. Schnee tells him he did what he had to, and it's okay to be sad. Next up, they're visiting Schweid the High Dragnir, one of Shin's old support characters. Schnee and Tira are rocking cosplay items made by Shin that hide what kind of species they are, so they can blend in with the locals. girls. Seriously, they're drop-dead gorgeous, and I'd totally wife either of them if I were there. They're trying to find Schweid the High Dragnir by asking their way to where the representatives of the various nations stay, and Wolfgang and Quor are directing them inside. On the way, Shin asks Schnee if Schweid's a monarch like Geirart, and she says no. He was the first emperor of the Dragon Empire, Kilmont, but he cut ties with the imperial family. She adds that Schweid's been living the easy life ever since Kilmont stabilized. They get to the entrance of a room, the guard shows them to their seats, and then goes to get Lord Schweid. Wolfgang also pieces out, saying he's got a meeting, but tells them to let Quor know if they need anything. Schweid rolls in a sec later, and he's straight up bowing to Shin. His main man, he's totally stoked to see him and ready to get back to work. His body's kinda saying nah, but Shin's all, chill dude, I gotta fill you in, just like I did with Schnee, and Schnee's backs him up. Schweid's a little confused why Schnee's calling Shin by his first name, but he plays it cool. First thing he notices is Schnee's outfit, and he's like, yo, why the getup? Schnee's all, it's for Shin's taste, duh. Shin finds it amusing, and then lays everything out for Schweid. Schweid's bummed about Geirart kicking the bucket, but at least he went down swinging, you know? Then he asks Shin what his next move is. Shin's been hitting the books at the local libraries, so now he wants to check out the spot, but Schweid's gotta head back to Kilmont, though he wants in on the action later. He's like, it's been ages since we partied up, bro. Let's use telepathy to stay in touch. Before he bails, he hands Shin his weapon, Nagazuki. He hasn't held it in forever, but it feels right at home. Shin says he's been keeping it in tip-top shape, and even Schweid can tell it's got way more juice than he remembers. Turns out Shin's mana control's leveled up since he fixed Geirart's gear, so now Nagazuki's 5 times stronger. Schweid and everyone else are blown away. Over at the guild, Shin wants to bump his adventurer rank up to, like, sea level, so he grabs a goblin slaying quest. Quor chimes in, asking if she can tag along. Shin's down with it. She says she'll wrap up her leftover work when she gets back. She's checking out the Ralua forest, you know, where that crazy duel went down, to make sure it's healing up right. Apparently, the place looks like a tornado threw a rave and then dipped without cleaning up. Shin asks if he can come along since he was part of the duel. She says yes, of course. First, they're off to goblin hunt in the regular forest, then they're hitting up Ralua forest to see what's up, and guess what? The forest is totally back to normal. Quor says they need to scope out the new trees and look for anything sus. She tells them to snag any weird herbs they find sprouting up. At the end of the day, they hit up the guild to give him the lowdown. The guild dude hands Shin a letter from Barlux, the guild master from Bayrelict. It says Shin needs to haul butt to Bayrelict as soon as possible, near the palace. He's scratching his head, wondering what's up, and then it clicks. It's probably about that skull-faced Jack's sword that smashed into the castle. Now he's gotta deal with that before he can grind his rank. Schnee and Tira are coming along for the ride, and so is Quor, but she can't ditch her country. Then, he asks to see Wolfgang so he can give him Gerard's Death Moon, Gerard's hand-fang weapon, before he heads to Bayrelict. He tells him it's already changed owners, so Wolfgang can pass them along to whoever he wants. Wolfgang's like, how'd you get these? I heard they got wrecked in the duel. Shin says he basically rebuilt it, so fixing it was no biggie, but he admits that Geirart wanted him to give them to Wolfgang after the duel. Wolfgang takes them for a spin, and they feel perfect in his hands, so he's in. Instead of taking the wagon, which is too slow, he uses his crystal doohickey to teleport them to another area. Then he checks his map and sees someone's watching them, but he uses stealth. They probably think the Moon Sanctum is gonna pop up there, but they forgot it can move around. Speaking of the Moon Sanctum, Schnee gets all nervous that Shin might vanish again, but she quickly acts like nothing's wrong when Shin gives her the side eye. Then they're on their way, leaving Shin in the dust. He's like, hey, I'm the one Barlux summoned. They roll up to the Bayrelict Guild, where he tells the twin sisters about the letter from the guildmaster. Silica pieces out to grab the guildmaster. Then Shin asks Celica if she knows what's going on. She says she doesn't know much, but she kinda figured he'd get summoned since he's not your average Joe adventurer. Celica changes the subject and points out he's always rolling with women. Shin retorts that he has guy friends too, like Wilhelm, who he worked with on some off-the-books thing. As soon as he says Wilhelm's name, the whole guild gets quiet, like a graveyard. Celica says Wilhelm hardly ever parties up with people, and there's all sorts of rumors about him, so people find him hard to approach, but Shin knows Wilhelm is the real deal. Silica's back and leads Shin to the guildmaster. He walks in to find Barlux and Arid Royal, the gem appraiser for the guild. Barlux tells Shin that Arid checked out the skullface gem he brought in before. Shin gets down to it and asks why he was summoned, but Arid's all, you know about that sword that crashed into the castle, right? Shin pretends like he's just heard the story. Arid says the massive sword slammed right into the second princess of Bayrelict's bedroom, but luckily no one got hurt. He adds that the sword's elemental magic and materials are top-notch, maybe even on par with the king's sword. The gem from the skullface Shin beat was packing some serious mana, high-level stuff. So, Shin asks how they figured out he was involved. Arod, the appraiser, says he was told to examine the sword, and the mana traces on it matched the mana from the gem. They followed the trail and found out Shin brought in the gem, so they called him in. Under the circumstances, the guild couldn't keep it a secret. Even Barlux couldn't do much. Barlux tells him that the situation isn't terrible because he had a letter of introduction from the Moon Sanctum. Getting down to business, Barlux says the second princess, Lady Ryo, is the one who summoned him. Shin's worried she's gonna blame him for almost hurting royalty, but Barlux reassures him he's not getting punished, since Lady Ryo has fought Skullfaces before, and she's convinced everyone that Shin had to go all out. Shin spills the tea about his convo with Barlux and Arid Royal to Schnee and Tira. Schnee figures they're gonna try to recruit him hard or marry him off to some big shot. This makes Shin not want to go at all, but Schnee says it's no biggie to turn him down. Besides, they'd be losing out big time if he bailed on his crew, so that should be enough of a reason. Schnee says he could tell them she's his fiancé, or maybe he's engaged to Tira if they start talking marriage. Yuzuha pops into human form and yells that she'll be Shin's fiancé. Then some goofy stuff ensues. The next day, Shin gets decked out in a red uniform and heads to the palace. When he gets there, the guard tells Gadras. Gadras shows up to escort him into the palace. Shin checks out Gadras's stats, level 188, and realizes he's one of the kingdom's heavy hitters. Finally, he makes it to the princess's room. She thanks him for showing up and introduces herself as Ryone Cytrail Baerlicht, the second princess of the kingdom. Shin bows and introduces himself as an adventurer, but she doesn't care about the formalities and tells him to call her Ryone. Without wasting time, Shin asks why he got summoned, and she says it's about the Skullface. She pulls out the sword from a safe box and asks if he recognizes it. He confirms it's the sword the Skullface was swinging. Then she drops this bomb. Most adventurers like Shin who suddenly stand out are chosen ones. She says they summon people to the palace when they find out they're powerful, though some have tried to use it as an opportunity to plot assassinations. Lady Ryone can tell Shin seems safe, but Shin points out he hasn't said anything to prove that. Ryone says she's got intuition skills and her gut's never wrong, but the biggest reason is that Shin had a letter of introduction from the Moon Sanctum, and the palace knows Schnee wouldn't give one to anyone planning to off someone. As soon as she mentions that, she says it's time to get down to business, and Shin starts sweating that she's gonna bring up marriage stuff, but instead, she says she wants him to fight her. Gadras is kinda thinking Princess Ryone is a total airhead, always jumping the gun. So, he's like, hold up, let's talk about Shin joining us later, alright? But she's all about checking out his skills first. Gadras wants to do things by the book, but she's not having any of his lame rules. She grabs the box with Skullface's sword and tells Shin to follow her. They head to a room with a teleporter. Shin's like, yo, why the teleport? She's all, we're going somewhere we can throw down, no holds barred. So, the three of them teleport to this training arena, built for chosen ones to duke it out. Shin asks what's the deal with the place, and she's like, beats me, probably did other stuff too. She adds that teleporters are ancient tech, way before the dusk of prosperity, and they still don't totally get how they work. Shin finds it sus that they have teleporters when teleportation's supposed to be lost magic. Anyway, they both grab weapons and get ready to rumble. Right before the fight, she tells him this is just a skill check, so she expects him to sweat a little. Gadras kicks off the battle. They clash, blade on blade. She drops her sword and tries to kick him, but Shin's quick and dodges it. Shin can see her stats, so he tweaks his to match. Then, he attacks, and it's blade on blade again. It turns into a straight-up strength contest. She's like, 8. Skills are fair game if you want. They both bust out the flashing vigor skill, and Gadras can barely tell the difference in their buffs. Then, she tries a lightning-fast attack again, but Shin dodges at the last second, and her sword smashes into the ground. Shin knows he'd be toast if he hadn't moved. Looks like they're pretty evenly matched in skill and reaction time. Gadras praises Shin, saying he's as skilled as the princess. He points out that her sword's about to break. Shin's like, yo, let's chill, call it a draw. We're both good at dodging. Then, she asks Shin to join their squad and serve the kingdom. She promises him a sweet position, not just some grunt, but Shin turns her down, saying he prefers the free life of an adventurer. He ain't the genie she's looking for. She tells him to hit her up if he ever changes his mind. Shin then asks why she's got Skullface's sword, and why she didn't use it when they were fighting. She says it's a tradition to give a woman a sword when you propose in their kingdom, and she'd use it to slice up any dude who cheats on her. Shin's kinda creeped out. She then says she'd like to consider the Skullface's sword a gift from him. Shin's brain immediately goes to the marriage proposal interpretation, so he's quick to say it was just an accident the sword went flying. She says she won't push it. Gadras tells him some people are plotting to use this whole thing to arrest him, make him a criminal, and have him work off his debt to the kingdom. Lady Ryone suggests they treat it like a tribute instead. Shin's feeling that way more than a marriage proposal. That way, Lady Ryone gets a powerful weapon. She adds that Shin gets the kingdom off his back, even though Gadras thinks it's weird. Lady Ryone says she'll pay Shin for the sword out of her own stash. They both agree they'd benefit from this arrangement, so she begs him to let her keep the sword. Shin, who wants to keep adventuring, says she can keep it and he doesn't need the cash. Instead, he asks for access to the restricted section of the magic library. Lady Ryone's wondering why this nobody isn't impressed by the sword, even though it's worth enough for him to live it up for the rest of his life. She then confesses that she's used the sword a few times, and it's starting to feel good in her hand. They teleport back to the castle and find the two guards lying dead on the floor. Standing over them is a kingdom priest named Cardinal Greril, and they're wondering what he's doing there. Shin checks out the dude's stats stats screen and figures out he's under charm and confusion spells. Gadras tries to stop Cardinal Greril, but both Shin and Lady Rione get teleported away. Gadras grabs Cardinal Greril. Unfortunately, they get teleported to some busted, unfinished place. Shin's like, "Where are we?" Lady Rion recognizes the place as the land, Kalkia. The whole place looks like a horror movie set. They seem to be the only ones there, totally deserted. Lady Rion's wondering what could make a priest as powerful as Cardinal Greril lose his marbles. Shin says they need to bail, so he asks if she can use telepathy. She says no, since she's not in a party with anyone. Shin decides to call his crew, Schnee and Tira, and tell them where to meet up. He asks her if there's a city nearby, and she mentions the walled city of Valmer, the only way in or out of Bayrelict. Lucky for him, Schnee calls at just the right time, sounding all worried and shaky. Shin calms her down, saying he's all good. She's scared he's gonna ditch them again, since he disappeared so suddenly. Then, he explains the situation to Schnee, and they figure someone's controlling Cardinal Greril. Schnee says mind control skills are super taboo, and even royals get the axe if they're caught using them. If that's the case, Shin says someone's lurking in the shadows. Shin says he could teleport out of there, but he doubts the princess and her crew would let him bounce if he uses magic that's supposedly lost. Then, he asks if Schnee can handle things there, and she says she's got it. He tells her to meet them in Valmer. Schnee tells Tira that Shin's okay, and then tells her to head to the palace as soon as possible. It's urgent. On their way to the palace, Schnee tells Tira that Shin's in some kind of trouble, and a demon, a monster born from miasma, is behind it. She describes them as loser scumbags who like to make people suffer, and the big difference between them and regular monsters is that they get stronger in miasma. Also, they can disguise themselves as other monsters. She adds that monsters infected with miasma attack everything around them, no discrimination. The more humanoid a demon is, the stronger and smarter it is, and they're ranked accordingly. So she figures it's probably a relatively smart demon, account class probably, level 300 at the lowest, 400 at the highest, since it used skills to control a dude. Tira gets freaked out that she's nowhere near that level. Schnee tells her they're just scouting today, so no need to worry. When they get to a safe spot near the castle, Schnee casts Hiding, a spell that makes them invisible, so people can't see or sense them. Then, they jump over the crazy high fence and sneak into the castle. They beeline it straight to the dungeon where the demon's caged up. They roll up to the entrance and find two guards just chilling there. Schnee's like, "Sleepy time," and puts them both to nap land with her sleep magic. Then, she snags the key from their unconscious bodies to unlock the dungeon. Boom! They reveal themselves to Cardinal Greril. Dude's totally shocked to see her, like, "What in the world are you doing here?" She spills the tea about what she heard, but plot twist, Cardinal Greril's got the taboo mind-affecting skill effect, hitting him hard, so he can't even remember anything being cast on him. He's trying so hard to remember, but all he can get are like fragments of memories. Schnee's all, "Aha, it's the double whammy of two mind-affecting conditions." She calms him down, tells him the two teleported victims are safe and sound. Then, she's like, "Time to yeet this status effect," and forces the demon out of him. Turns out, it's this multi-eyed demon with regenerating hands, name's Magnamuk, level 423. Schnee's like, "This dude's got a name, so he's gotta be somewhat smart." The ugly demon recognizes her as the blue-eyed, silver-haired high elf, always messing with their plans. She's like, "Whoa, it's been 500 years since I've seen one of you demons, not since the cataclysm." The demon tries to throw hands, but Schnee just keeps slashing him with her sword. The demon's like, "Why are you even protecting Cardinal Greril?" She hits him with the truth. It'd be a shame to let him die over some bogus charges. Plus, she lays down the law. It'd be a straight-up disgrace to the Moon Sanctum if I let you run wild. The dumb demon knows the Moon Sanctum is where the high humans used to hang out, and they clapped many of his kind. But the nasty demon tries to tempt her. "Join us." Schnee's like, "Nah, I'm good." The demon's all, "Why are you so set on dissing us and siding with a master who bailed on you? Why aren't you angry or bitter about those who abandoned you and just wanted your power?" Schnee's getting annoyed with his blabbing, and plus his timing is terrible because he's trying to trigger her. She whips out her blue moon sword and immediately gives his head a one-way ticket to the next dimension. He spits out some fake words, even as his body and head are falling apart. Schnee walks out of the dungeon with Cardinal Greril, along with Tira, Shimmer, and Yuzuha. They head straight to the king's palace. Everyone's wondering how she even got into the castle. The king's like, "What are you doing in the castle? How did you get into the dungeon?" She drops the knowledge bomb about the demons and the taboo mind, affecting skill they used on Cardinal Greril. The king realizes that the demons they read about in history books are actually back in action. The king, queen, and Gadras are stoked to hear Schnee's good news that the two teleported peeps are safe. The king's hoping Cardinal Greril will keep being their liaison with the church, but he apologizes and promises to work even harder from now on. Schnee tells the king he needs to control the info, because news of chaos in the castle would freak out the public. The king acknowledges it and asks what she's doing now. She says she's got places to be and dips out of the palace with her crew. Tira's curious how they're gonna get to the walled city of Valmer because Shin has their wagon, so she asks Schnee about it. Schnee's like, "Don't sweat it, we'll just run there." Then Schnee and Tira leave the castle and head to the walled city of Valmer by running. Tira's screaming her lungs out as her master speeds up, even though she's riding on Shimmer's back. Useless Shin asks Ryon what she knows about the Pure Lands. Ryon explains that the Pure Lands are are cities that crashed and burned during the Disc of Prosperity event, and rumor has it, it takes a bunch of chosen ones to take down the monsters that popped up in them. Airhead Shin points out they need weapons, and Ryo says she's happy she got teleported with the boxed skull-face sword. Ryo asks dummy Shin what he's gonna use to defend himself, and that prideful idiot Shin smiles with his eyes closed like a wet puppy trying to scratch an itch, while thinking to himself that he can't let the princess know just how strong he really is yet. Shin's like, it might be a struggle even for me to find our way out of this place. The two lost dummies are wandering around the Pure Land, and Ryo's telling a story about a tiny door that's supposed to be the exit and entrance to a new gate. Shin suggests they ditch the monster cleansing tour and just look for the door. Clueless Shin spots a wall and asks Ryo if she's cool with climbing it. Without waiting for an answer, he jumps into the air and slowly floats back. Shin asks Ryo what she saw during his jump, and she says when he got above the wall, he just vanished and then reappeared on the ground. Shin thinks the reappearing act has something to do with teleporting, so he tries jumping over a lower part of the fence. Shin figures out what's causing the problem. He leads Ryo deeper into the Pure Land, and they find a magic ball of light. Bonehead Shin smirks and tells Ryo that the light ball means the whole city is a dungeon. Ryo's shocked and says she's never heard of a city turning into a dungeon before. Shin explains that this city dungeon is different than a regular dungeon, and they can only get to the exit by following a set path. Ryo's like, aha, that's why you can't fly over the fence or take shortcuts. The route sends you back where you started. Shin, with a dumb smirk on his face, adds that they have to follow the magic light balls, dodge traps, and beat monsters to escape the dungeon. Ryo smiles at her surprisingly helpful partner and says she's glad Shin's her teleported buddy. Shin returns the compliment, and the princess blushes like an idiot. Ryo takes charge and tells Shin to let her know if he sees anything weird. Shin announces that the magic light ball will teleport them to a new spot, and he volunteers to go first and come back to make sure it's safe. Shin touches the magic light ball, teleports away, and comes back quickly like he promised. He tells the princess, Ryo, that the new place is safe and not too far away. The princess apologizes for using Shin as a guinea pig, and Shin assures her that he wanted to go first because he knows he can handle whatever's on the other side. And Shin gives his usual goofy smile and thinks to himself that he could easily destroy any monster in the game world if nobody was watching. Ryo promises to repay Shin for his kindness, and the two lost fools teleport through the magic light ball. Shin scans the area and announces there's a monster lurking around. The two goofballs run towards the monster to kick its butt. Facing the monster, Ryo asks Shin what that ugly beast is. Shin explains that it's a ghost-type monster called a Gillyways that uses earth and wind magic. Shin warns the princess that the monster's movements are unpredictable. The Gilly jumps into the air and throws down a dust tornado magic on whoever's attacking it. Shin's like, yo princess, chill. I got this spell. Just try to land a hit on this Gilly dude. Shin busts out a crazy zigzag slash, knocking the monster on its butt. Ryo jumps down screaming, slicing the monster in half. Shin smirks and finishes the job. Ryo's grinning, asking how they wrecked that thing in like 3 moves. Shin explains that the skill-face sword she's swinging has light magic. He adds that light's a weakness for some monsters. Ryo's stoked and asks about his sword. Shin tells her it's called Kakura. After Ryo teases Shin about having a secret, super-powered sword, these two goons waltz over. Ryo asks Shin how many monsters he can sense with his magic radar, aka his invisible game settings, and Shin says he can spot 20. He mentions that monsters usually stick to their own turf in the dungeon, but they should still watch their backs. They pass through another magic light ball, and bam, they're face to face with a high-level slime monster. Ryo totally ignores Shin's warnings. She zooms into the air, swinging her new sword. The slime surprises her, sliding away and pinning her down with its gooey bits. Shin dashes in and blasts the slime to bits. Like a total idiot, Shin starts rambling about teaming up and taking it down together. Ryo smirks, pointing out that Shin's getting all casual with her. Unlike when they first met, Shin spins around, avoiding eye contact. The princess asks why he's trying so hard to ignore her. Shin awkwardly points out that, the slime kinda melted a good chunk of her clothes. Ryo squeals and covers herself up. Shin offers her his jacket, shivering from the cold. Ryo notices Shin's got a ton of outfits, and Shin nervously says he got most of them as gifts with the tools. While they're patrolling, Shin asks if Ryo can use magic, but she's like, we barely use that to fight. Shin tells Schnee his plan to teach the princess some spells. After those lessons, the two goofballs are wandering around the dungeon when they stumble upon an egg-shaped monster. Shin's like, this dungeon is trying to mess with us. The egg hatches, turning into a massive, nasty griffin monster that blasts out a freezing energy wave. Shin snatches Ryo up and flies out of there, just in time to dodge the blast. In a safe spot, Ryo asks Shin to put her down and wants to know what they should do. Shin tells her to attack from behind while he plays decoy. Ryo grins and asks her dummy partner if he can handle it. Shin assures her that he doubts the monster will even hit him, but if it does, he can take it. With that, Shin starts running and distracting the monster. He whips out a bunch of finger blades and throws them at the monster. Ryo sees her chance and jumps in, hacking pecking away at it. The monster smacks Ryo with its wing, and Ryo's like, "Whoa, that's strong." Shin yells to get Ryo's attention, and Ryo looks up. Ryo asks Shin if it's done for, and Shin's all happy, saying the griffin's toast. Then, bam, the monster regenerates. Shin's like, "No way, we totally wrecked it," but Ryo points out it's back at 100%. The monster screeches and blasts them with freezing breath, and Ryo and Shin book it for their lives. While they're running, Ryo asks Shin how to take this thing down. After thinking hard, Shin has an idea and asks Ryo for a favor. Ryo's shocked when Shin tells her to find the gate-opening device herself, but Shin ignores her and tells her he'll slow down the monster while she checks out the mechanism. Ryo's like, "Why me in the opening mechanism?" Shin points out that the monster's fast healing is probably from magic, and there's a spell somewhere that's regenerating it. Ryo adds that the spell must be linked to the opening mechanism. Ryo points out that opening the gate could temporarily stop the griffin and give them a chance to escape. Shin smirks and mentions that monsters like to put on shows and mess around. With that, Shin goes high into the sky and inwardly apologizes to Ryo. Shin confesses that it doesn't matter if there's a spell or not. With Ryo out of the way, Shin unleashes his maximum power and destroys the monster in a single slash. The monster's head regenerates, and Shin happily says he's gonna use the monster as a lab rat to see how much power he can release at once. After defeating the regenerated monster for the 30th time, Shin decides to change his strategy. A white sphere appears in the monster's chest and starts pulling Shin in. Shin throws a fire attack, but the sphere absorbs it. Shin gets wrapped in golden light and breaks free from the monster's pull. Shin attacks the dummy giant and notices it can't regenerate anymore. Shin slices its neck and watches it explode into nothing. Ryo walks up and asks what the explosion was and where the griffin went. Shin tells her he obliterated the monster while she was gone. Outside the dungeon, Shin tells Ryo they're meeting up with a friend in the next town. Shin tells Schnee he'll be camping with the princess. Schnee immediately tells Tira and the mythical animals to get moving. That night, Shin offers to take the first watch and gives Ryo some tea. Ryo asks how he's so prepared, like he knew they'd be camping. Shin explains he used to travel with an item box. Ryo looks at Shin with admiration and gets closer to him. Ryo tries to trick Shin into joining the army, but he refuses. Ryo says it's nice to finally meet someone who's blunt enough to have a fun chat with. Shin asks Ryo if she's close with her family, but she says she's not. Shin says he's happy to chat with her anytime before noticing Ryo snuggled up in his arms. And the next morning, a huge horde of skull faces marches towards the next town, Valmer, where they're meeting Schnee and the others. Ryo wonders why so many monsters are heading towards Valmer. She calls it a flood. Shin's confused and asks what a flood is. Ryo explains that a flood is when magic overflowing from a pure land comes together, transforms, and unleashes a buttload of monsters. Ryo adds that the mist Garuda protects the area around the pure land, and Valmer's the only way to avoid the mist. She continues that Valmer's fortified and acts as a shield against magic floods. Ryo tells Dimwit Shin that Valmer has strong people and chosen ones, but the city always takes heavy losses. Ryo sighs and says that against a major flood, Valmer might not stand a chance. Shin tells himself he needs to tell Schnee to hurry to Valmer. Idiot Shin points out that the monsters won't reach Valmer for a while and tells Ryo they need to join the Valmer army. At Valmer, Ryo's like, "Yo, Shin, how long till these monsters roll up on the town?" Shin's all, a few days, tops. Ryo bails to meet the local lord and tells Shin to hit up the Adventurers Guild. Shin, being the total airhead he is, asks what's next. Ryo's like, "The guild and army are gonna be key for this epic invasion, and the chosen ones gotta assemble." Over at the guild, Shin links up with the guild master and drops the bomb about the monster flood heading their way. The guild master's like, "Dude, you talking like you actually saw this thing." Shin's like, "Yeah, man, a ton of nasty monsters near the Pure Land, coming straight for Valmer." The guild master says if Shin's not yanking his chain, they gotta start prepping as soon as possible. Shin whips out his Moon Sanctum ID card, like, "Proof, bro, I'm legit." Shin tells him to check with the lord if he's still sus, cause his buddy's already meeting with him. The guild master's all, "Nah, I trust ya," and announces they're declaring a state of emergency. He adds that if Shin's friend has the lord's ear, the army's gonna jump into action quick. The guild master keeps going, saying they'll start evacuating everyone as soon as they get the green light from the top. Then he turns to his assistant and orders her to hit up all the guild reps. After she pieces out, the guild master asks Shin what he wants to do. Of course, stupid Shin volunteers to stay and fight the monsters. What a noble idiot. The guild master thanks him, but mentions they're running low on weapons. Shin starts daydreaming about some signboard in town. Schnee contacts him to let him know she's almost at Valmer. Shin tells her to tell the guild master she wants in on the monster fight in action. Shin then asks Schnee about that poster, but she's clueless. Shin bumps into this short blonde elf, Beret, who he recognizes. Beret's stoked to see Shin. Shin's all, "No way I'd run into a supporting character from the game here." Over tea, Beret asks if Shin's joining the Valmer army to fight the flood. Shin, slow as always, confirms he is, and says he just got done chatting with the guild master. Beret asks why Shin didn't just wipe the flood off the map, and Shin explains he was with the second princess and can't go full power with her watching. Beret smirks and says he can totally see a princess proposing to him. Shin laughs his usual lame laugh and brags that the second princess is into him, hence why he's trying trying to take out the flood without going all out. Barret offers to help Shin whenever. Then Shin suddenly remembers that signboard he was staring at in the town square. Barret's like, "Oh, that's Hibaneko's shop, you know? Your old friend?" Shin's surprised Hibaneko's still around. Barret mentions a few other of Shin's friends in Valmer. He says they're out of town on business, but they're doing fine. Shin admits he thought they died in the death game. Barret's like, "Don't be surprised," and says he's got a list of players in this world. He hands it over, and Shin notices every player on the list is someone he knows. Barret hands over another list, explaining it's a run-in list of known player killers. Shin remembers those jerks took out a bunch of his friends and other people during the death game. Barret says Schnee was the one who pushed to find player killers when players first showed up. Shin's like, Schnee never said a word about other players. Barret points out that Schnee hiding that info is basically betrayal. Shin chuckles like the little scumbag he is, and Barret adds that supporting characters can't deliberately keep important intel from their masters. He says Schnee's gotta be his follower, but she needs punishing for hiding stuff. Shin insists Schnee would never betray him, but then he flashes back to Schnee playing dumb about the signboard. Barret backtracks and says Schnee would never intentionally hurt Shin. Too late, dude. The seed of doubt's already planted. Shin repeats that Schnee would never betray him. Barret announces he needs to start preparing for the flood. Shin asks if he's fighting with the army, but Barret says Valmer's safe with Shin around. While walking in town, Shin tells Schnee that he did some research and found out a powerful boss-type dude shows up in the middle of low-level monster hordes sometimes. He says the bigger the flood, the more likely it is. Yuzuha randomly hugs Shin, and he asks Tira where Schnee is. The next day, Tira asks where Shin's going. He tells her he's gotta meet with the Chosen Ones at the Lord's castle. Shin points out that Schnee got back super late, so he didn't get to ask her about the player killers or the other players. Shin then has that flashback of Barret calling Schnee a betrayer. The Lord of Valmer welcomes Shin and introduces him to his crew. The Lord lays out the battle plan, and Tira feels bad for the knights under Schnee. After waiting around, the monsters never show, so the team regroups to figure out what's going on. Schnee chimes in, saying she's seen floods disappear like this before. She adds that after the disappearance, the monsters just pop up out of nowhere and attack the town. Shin realizes that's a key event from the game. Schnee opens her eyes and says there's a good chance a powerful boss monster is leading this massive flood. On the way to the Moon Sanctum, Shin asks Schnee if she used big, epic spells in guild battles when he was gone. Schnee denies it and says she could handle stuff with normal area of effect spells. At the Moon Sanctum, Shin forges a badass bow for Tira. While everyone's waiting for the flood, Schnee tells Shin she wants to talk to him about something after the battle. The monsters show up at Valmer, and Schnee throws down some massive blue magic, obliterating a bunch of them, and Ryo orders the soldiers to attack. Shin realizes this flood ain't no joke and tells Schnee to do the blue light spell again, but Schnee says through their mind link thingy that she can't spam large range attacks like that. Shin jumps into the sky and pulls out his fire sword. The monsters around him burst into flames. Before Ryo can lead the army forward, Tira shoots an arrow that explodes in the middle of the monsters. Ryo smirks at Tira's cute celebration and attacks a line of monsters. A huge monster attacks Ryo. Just then, Wilhelm swoops in and saves Ryo. Tira recognizes Wilhelm, and Lacey greets Tira from behind, offering to refill her mana. Ryo and Wilhelm team up and take down the huge monster. Ryo thanks Wilhelm for the save and asks why he's in Valmer. Wilhelm explains the guild got a request for help. Wilhelm has a flashback to Marie, begging him to save Shin from the monsters and smirks. Shin's rocking full body armor and just smashes this monster into the ground like it's nothing. The guards are all, "Who are you, dude?" Shin's like, "Just call me Red," and then tells them to bounce so he can go ham with his powers. The guards peace out, scared out of their minds, and Shin unleashes his cursed axe. He's slicing and dicing monsters left and right when bam, he sees the event boss. This demon throws some mind control spell at the soldiers, but Shin's not having it. He busts through his attribute limits, jumps in the air, and wham, one huge smash with the axe and the demon's gone. Dumb Schnee tells her even dumber master that the monsters are all cleared, and the town's wondering how nobody died. Wilhelm and Lacey dip after the battle, but Shin and the girls are stuck celebrating. At the party, Ryo calls Shin over, and Schnee's all jealous, asking her master if anything happened between him and Ryo. Shin instantly denies it, acting all awkward around Ryo. Schnee storms off, classic jealous girlfriend move. What a bunch of freaking losers. Shin goes to talk to Schnee. Schnee apologizes for ditching her idiot master. Shin asks if she's jealous, and she admits it. She then asks if Barret spilled the tea about the other players and player killers, and Shin says yeah. Schnee's instantly sorry for not telling him, saying she was scared he'd revert back to his old self if he knew other players were out there. Then she starts bawling, saying she doesn't know how to go back to who she used to be, and that she wants to be Shin's rock. Shin pulls her into a surprise hug to calm her down. Shin apologizes and says he would have done the same thing if he were her. He admits that after beating the game boss and ending up back in the game world, he felt mega lonely until they reunited, and he realized Schnee remembered him. Shin says he's not gonna punish her but makes her promise to never keep secrets again. Out of nowhere, Schnee asks if Shin's still in love with Mariano, and Shin says he is. Schnee just ignores that bombshell and kisses him. She looks him dead in the eye and says she won't give up on her love for him, even after he goes back to his own world. Schnee heads back to the party, and the crew chills and enjoys the the rest of the night. The next morning, Shin and the girls split from Valmer and head to the next town.